Hey there, welcome to Sin's Workshop's very first podcast episode. Today we're going to be talking about Infinity Son by Adam Silvera. The review for it just went up on Sin's Workshop today, so if you want to go ahead and just skip listening to me and go ahead and read it, it's on sinsworkshop.com. But today we're going to rant a little bit about some of my feelings regarding that book. It's an okay book. I had some problems with it, and if you read my review, you'll see the problems I had with it. But first, I want to get right into it. It's an interesting book. It's fantasy, urban fantasy. It takes place in what we would consider modern day Earth, but there's magic. There are creatures. There are people like celestials, bloodcasters, and spellwalkers. The problem is, from the get-go, there's not really a lot of world building to attach the reader to the premise of the story. We just kind of know about the Celestials, but we don't know, are they just humans who were born special, or what? You know, sometimes it seems like they're otherworldly, possibly alien. We don't really know. There's not a lot of context given their history, and there's a lot of history hinted at. But again, we don't really know much about the Celestials. We don't really know a whole lot about the Spellwalkers or the Bloodcasters. We're kind of just dropped in the middle of all of it. It's this whole Celestial celebration, and the two brothers, Emil and Brighton, are out celebrating. And then they are caught in everything. And I just wish there was a little bit more context, you know. There's lots of references to an event that happened, but I believe it was called the Blackout, but there's not really a lot of context given to what this blackout was. Like, what was the scenario? Like, was it like a bomb that went off? We're not really sure. So we have no idea what's really going on from the beginning. We just know that there are magical people. And it's a modern day world where magical people reside in. That's about it. So that's probably one of my issues with it. I just wish there had been a little bit more context, a little bit more history and world building given to the reader. As for characterization, that was another one of my issues with this story. Emil's great. I like Emil. I think he's a very good protagonist. He is a gay protagonist, and I think that's very strong. You know, he's not gentle. Well, that's wrong. He is a very gentle person. He has a lot of self-doubt, but sometimes it's a little self-deprecating. It comes off as a lot of self-loathing, which, you know, in context I can understand. You know, a lot of people who stay in the closet, they stay in the closet not just for fear of ostracization from society, but, you know, they aren't happy with who they are. They don't accept themselves either. I've had some people tell me their coming out story. Some of my closest friends say that to me. So I can understand it in that context. I just wish it wasn't so self-deprecating. I wish he had stepped away from that, Silvera, and just focused on growing out the character, because for 3/4 of the book, he's not really accepting of who he is. And I just wish if he had grown him out earlier on in the novel, it would have really been a big step for the LGBTQ community. And you know, it could resonate with the readers a little bit more in that context. His brother's terrible. I cannot stand Brighton. Brighton and Maya. They are probably the two worst characters in the entire novel. Brighton is Emil's brother, and he just wants to have powers so badly. So when it's discovered that Emil is the one with the powers, you know, and I think the reader knows that the right brother got the powers, because it takes more strength to forgive than it is to just go to war. And Emil doesn't want to kill. And yes, there are times when it's necessary, and this is something he has to learn, but there should always be other alternatives to look at first, in my personal opinion. And I think that's probably why I like Emil so much, because he's so focused on going forward. He's so focused on looking for a way for peace to undo so much of the bad things that have happened in this world. And that's what makes Emil a strong character. Brighton, though, he's power hungry, and I wouldn't be surprised if in the sequel or the book after he becomes the villain. I mean, he's not a good person. He's all about his blog, and he's all about getting viewers, and he's just all about me throughout the entire novel. Yes, there are times where he shows he cares, but even in his narrative, he says things like, I should have been the one with the power. It's like, come on, get over yourself. He's just very unlikable. And Maya is another one. She's just a terrible, terrible human being. I cannot stand her. She's driven solely by revenge and anger. And she's another one like me, as if she's the only one who matters, as if her fight is the only fight that matters. And that's why she's not the leader, because she can't see far enough beyond her own nose and to care. Sorry, I had to drink a cup of coffee. So I think that's another issue I have with her. She's not nice. She's very cruel at times to Emil as a person, and I think there's no reason for it, just because they don't see eye to eye. And she's pretty much rude to everyone who she doesn't see eye to eye with. I don't understand how she has a boyfriend. He must really love her and is super understanding, and I just don't like her. I don't. And a lot of the other characters, they don't really stand out enough. Once again, Emil is the star of the story. He's the star, and I like that he's the star because he has growth. There is growth, and it takes a while. Again, 3/4 of the book, he is mostly a self-loathing, self-deprecating person, but despite that, he still tries to remain optimistic about what the fight's about. He focuses on the people he loves, the people he cares about, and he's doing everything. I just wish comments like, I'm not a fighter, I own that, were kind of left out more, because they come off too repetitive. They come off a little too often. And that's probably my issue with that. The pacing of the story is okay as well. It's a steady pace. It doesn't go too fast. It doesn't go too slow. It doesn't really drag. It moves very steadily. It does move steadily. It does capture your attention. Switching between point of views between these characters. It does give the story a more rounded texture to it. You get to see more of what's going on. I always tend to like multiple POVs because you get to see a larger scope of the story that's going on. And I think that's kind of what I liked about it. Well, that is what I liked about it, not I think. But I liked that about that. Ness, I believe that character's name was Ness. You'll have to forgive me. I read this book probably like 3 weeks ago. And yes, now I'm just now getting to this. That's another very good character. He's funny. He's charming. He's just like my little son here. And I think that progression of the story, that development was very thought out. That one was very thought out. It was very cohesive. It moved very smoothly. And he's nice to Emil. He is. He's a good partner for Emil. Versus Brighton, who's terrible. Brighton's terrible. Maya's terrible. And Emil deserves better. I will say this, the novel is kind of full of cliches. You know, Emil's the chosen one. He's an orphan. He was found alone. But he's the chosen one. He has all this power, and it's kind of predictable. And his brother, again, if his brother becomes a villain in the next book, I'm not going to be surprised. His brother, again, is all about himself. And I will read the next book just to see if I'm right, honestly. But there are a few too many fantasy tropes. Not really cliches. I take that back. Not cliches. Fantasy tropes, you know, those tropes that you use to write a fantasy story. There are a little too many of them, and they're not really constructed in a way to make them unique or original. And I haven't read any other books by Silvera. I've looked them up, contemporary fiction. So this is something that was clearly a little out of his element, but he had fun with it. You can tell that the author had fun doing what they were doing. I just think the characterization needed more work, so that way the characters were at least a little bit more likable and not so standoffish. You've got 4 POVs, and half of them you don't even want to read. But that's me. That's my opinion. For a more decent review of this novel, go ahead to Sin's Workshop. It just went up today. Check it out. Subscribe. And have a great day. I hope you enjoyed my very first podcast. I can tell it was very amateurish. I'm owning that. But, you know, practice makes perfect. So I'll be here. And if you want to stick around and listen for more, or if my voice is too annoying for you, just go ahead, sinsworkshop.com. Subscribe. Have a nice day, guys.